You are moving forward, solving problems, doing fine. Then, out of nowhere, you hit a wall, a problem you simply cannot solve. Society has a very traditional way of framing this moment. You have reached the absolute limit of your inherent intelligence. Stanford researcher Carol Dweck wanted to study the exact psychology of this moment. To do it, she brought in a group of 10-year-old students and deliberately gave them puzzles that were too difficult for them to solve. For some of these children, hitting that intellectual wall was catastrophic. They felt their core intelligence had been put on trial, and they had failed. They were operating with a fixed mindset, believing that a single setback is permanent proof of their limitations. But another group of children reacted to the exact same failure with surprising enthusiasm. They said things like, "I love a challenge," or "I was hoping this would be informative." They possessed a growth mindset. How we navigate the world depends heavily on which of these two reactions is programmed into our brains, whether our instinct is to retreat from friction or to lean directly into it. When you view intelligence as a finite, unchangeable resource, failure becomes dangerous, so you adapt. In one study tracking how kids cope with failure, students with a fixed mindset explicitly stated they would choose to cheat on their next test rather than increase their study efforts. In another study, these same individuals actively searched for peers who scored lower than they did. If they couldn't improve their own performance, they could at least soothe their bruised egos by finding someone doing worse. Across multiple experiments, the data reveals a steady, pervasive pattern. Those who believe their abilities are set in stone will systematically run away from any task that threatens to expose a weakness. Believing you have a hard cap on your intelligence actively degrades your resilience, compromises your ethical choices, and prevents you from pushing past your current limits. To understand exactly why these reactions diverge so sharply, we have to look past outward behavior and examine the physical brain. Researcher Jason Moser and his colleagues attached electrodes to students' heads to measure real-time electrical activity as they made mistakes. This side-by-side diagram maps electrical signals inside the brain as it encounters an error. Look at the left side, representing the fixed mindset. When a mistake happens, there is almost no electrical activity. The brain effectively stagnates. Now look at the right side, representing the growth mindset. The moment an error registers, it erupts in dark red. It is actively processing the mistake, learning from the failure, and formulating a correction. This vibrant electrical activity is the visual footprint of neuroplasticity, the brain's biological ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural pathways. When you tackle a problem that pushes you out of your comfort zone and you persist through the frustration, you are quite literally forcing your neurons to bridge physical gaps. You are forging new, denser connections inside your head. Our cognitive capacity is not a pre-installed software package. It operates entirely like a muscle, and just like a muscle, it requires the intense friction of failure to tear, repair, and grow stronger. If the brain can physically restructure itself, we need to know how to trigger that process. The first systemic hack is what researchers call praising wisely. Telling someone they are inherently smart makes them fragile, fearful of losing that label. Praising their process, their strategy, focus, and perseverance trains them to actively seek out challenges. To test this in the real world, researchers teamed up with game scientists at the University of Washington to build a custom math game called BrainPoints. This interface shows how they subverted standard gaming mechanics. It strips away the traditional right or wrong scoreboard and entirely ignores correct answers. It only awards points to fill a learning curve meter based on sustained effort and strategy. The second hack is even simpler, and it comes down to replacing a single word. Instead of giving a student the definitive grade of fail, you give them the grade not yet. Not yet implies an active learning curve. By shifting our vocabulary and restructuring our rewards away from immediate perfection, we manually trigger the brain's biological growth mode. When we shift our focus from individual brain chemistry to the wider world, we have to ask, what happens when these interventions are applied to the students our society has historically left behind? In a Harlem kindergarten class, a teacher faced children who threw daily tantrums and couldn't even hold a pencil. By saturating that room with a growth mindset, she guided those same students to the 95th percentile on the National Achievement Test. The results replicated. A South Bronx fourth grade class, starting way behind, used these principles to top the New York State math test. In Washington State, a historically failing elementary school on a Native American reservation adopted a growth mindset. Within 18 months, their young readers were outperforming students from the most affluent sections of Seattle, surpassing even the children of Microsoft employees. A 13-year-old boy wrote to Dr. Dweck after testing these principles himself. He reported that his grades rose, his relationship with his parents improved, and he finally felt a sense of personal worth, realizing, in his words, that he had wasted most of his life before understanding his own potential. When we prove that basic human abilities can be grown, the way we treat every struggling student becomes a moral question. Providing an environment that fosters this growth is a fundamental human right. It allows us to transition away from a workforce dependent on constant rewards and toward a future where every learner is empowered by the simple power of yet.